Hi, I'm Nick Maselli. At TD Bank, we believe all citizens need to be informed about the important financial issues that affect their daily lives. That's why we're proud to support programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
Funding for the new Congress, U.S. Senators Menendez and Booker. A conversation with Steve Adubato at NJPAC has been provided by TD Bank, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Natural Gas, proud to support education in our communities, Barnabas Health, Life is Better Healthy, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, NJM, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and more, with a focus on safety and financial stability. And by NJ Best, New Jersey's 529 college savings plan. Turn a dream into a degree.
Hi, I'm Rafael Piroman. My colleague Steve Adubato recently had the opportunity to sit down with New Jersey's United States Senators Bob Menendez and Cory Booker. Together, they discussed a range of state and national issues. We hope you enjoy this special edition of New Jersey Capitol Report.
Welcome to New Jersey Performing Arts Center. I'm Steve Adubato. This is a program called The New Congress, a conversation with United States Senators Bob Menendez and Cory Booker. We're with a live audience, and you can tell from the applause. Together with our partners in public broadcasting, WNET, NJTV, FiOS, and New Jersey Advanced Media, and so many others. Let's get right to it. We're taping this program on the 5th of December. The Eric Garner, no verdict, if you will, or a decision not to indict. The Michael Brown case before. Both of you have spoken out publicly. What is the role, Senator Menendez, of the federal government now that these two decisions have been made?
Well, as has been announced, it's appropriate for the Department of Justice to conduct their own independent views now that the states have made their own decisions, and we look forward to that, to hear what they conclude. I think it's tragic at the end of the day that two lives were lost, particularly when there are two individuals, both unarmed, at the end of the day. And something is wrong when, for the alleged crime of selling cigarettes that were untaxed, you lose your life. Something is dramatically wrong about that. And so, in addition to the investigations of the Justice Department, which is fitting and appropriate, the conversation that President Obama has talked about leading across the country, and the conversation that my colleague, Senator Booker, is leading in the Senate on this issue is, I think, incredibly important, because the reason that we have protests is to create change. And that change is about having a system of justice in which every citizen, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or the happenstance of where they were born or what station of life they were born into, can believe what it says over the Supreme Court's mantle: equal justice under law. And that's what we have to ultimately drive towards, and not just think about these as isolated incidents, but as a reality and a challenge that we have as a nation to create a more perfect union.
You mentioned Ferguson, Staten Island, but there's been Cleveland. There's a lot of other issues that are sort of flashing up to the public's attention right now. But, you know, we have a nation that has these incredible ideals that are very special in the globe, and we pride ourselves on being a nation of equality, of fairness, and justice. But when you begin to look at the numbers and of what really goes on within our criminal legal system, you see that we really don't yet have a justice system that provides justice at the levels that we want it. And this is something I've been struggling with for years, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why I chose to run for the United States Senate, because there's so many things that we could, should, and must do on the federal level to address a justice system or a legal system that's not doing that. And just the examples I want to give is that we know fundamentally that minorities are treated differently in the criminal justice system. The easiest example of that is arrests for marijuana. Right. There is no difference between pot usage. In fact, the last 3 presidents admitted to smoking marijuana. One may not have inhaled, but the last...
You still believe that? We'll leave that alone.
We'll leave that alone. But the reality is African Americans are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested, even though there's no differences in usage of marijuana. Blacks and Latinos get, for the same crimes, will get longer sentences, more likely to get the mandatory minimums. And there is a pervasive understanding in this country by large populations that they're not going to get a fair shake when it comes to this broken system. And so we have to understand that right now, as we sit here tonight, there are thousands of Americans, coast to coast, doing a constructive, creative protest around these issues and the urgency with which to change them.
But Senator Booker and Senator Menendez, so many people on NJ.com, as well as on FiOS, one of our other partners, through social media, because our partners, people ask questions through many different social media sources. They kept asking, what can the federal government do? Now that these indictments have not happened, what is the appropriate role of the federal government? Because I think a lot of people, and these are what people were saying on NJ.com, on FiOS and other places, so the federal government's going to come in, civil rights case. What realistically can the feds do right now, Senator?
Well, depending on their decision of the facts as they deduce them in a civil rights case, they might bring federal charges. That's one possibility.
What does that mean?
Well, they might view that, and there's a pretty high standard to have to be met, but they might view that in individual cases, the actions of the officer or officers involved rose to a level that, in fact, violated federal statutes and therefore could be criminally prosecuted under federal law. There is a review about police departments across the country and the nature of how they ultimately act with their citizens. There is a view going on about how do we train police departments in this country? How do we look at something that I found tremendously successful when I was a mayor in a real significant way, which was community policing, not just the cop on the beat, but a cop who had the confidence of the people that he was protecting. Because if police departments, and look, police departments have a tough job, and I think overwhelmingly our officers do a good job, but if police departments at the end of the day cannot have the faith and confidence of the very people that they are there to protect, that's a problem. So how do we work at creating that bond? These are all elements that the federal government can participate in helping communities across the country, part through their resources, part through the federal COPS program, part through the Department of Justice guidelines, part through the investigation of the Department of Justice.
But actually in our audience tonight, one of the people in our audience is the mayor of the great city of Newark, Ras Baraka, who, and if I'm wrong on this, Mayor, you'll tell me because you never hold back. He argued, others have argued, that body cameras for police officers, you actually did an interview we had today, right here at NJPAC. He said it was absolutely essential to do that. Should they be mandated, Senator? Body cameras for police officers so that police officers are protected and citizens are protected, because that level of trust is gone in the eyes of many.
All the data shows from departments that have them that complaints against police officers go way down. You're actually, the police departments, many of the officers resisted in the beginning, but saw they were such an asset for the police officers as well as for the safety community and as well as another layer of accountability. But I don't want to keep small little strategies are important. Doing these things are critical and urgent.
What should we do?
There has to be a broad-based reform of our criminal justice system at every single level, from the policing level all the way through the sentencing courts, what happens in our prisons, all the way back to what happens when people are coming back into society. We've skewed so dramatically off the rails that a nation now that has 4 to 5% of the globe's population is now imprisoning, and we're paying for it, trillions of our taxpayer dollars, billions of our tax dollars here in New Jersey, when we should be investing in schools, universities, roads, is incarcerating 25% of the globe's imprisoned people. Now, that's bad enough, and 70+% of them are nonviolent offenders. But then when you start looking at who is getting arrested, you start to see that poor folks and minorities are dramatically much more likely to be in prison. And a lot of this has happened just since the 1970s. Our prison population has exploded 10 times alone since the 1970s because of this drug war. And the last thing to say is, so what happens to that kid that gets arrested that is more likely to be searched, to be surveilled, to be arrested, what are the collateral consequences of a 17 or 18-year-old kid getting arrested for a marijuana or a nonviolent drug offense? What are the collateral, what do we do to that young person? Well, we say that, okay, now you've got a felony conviction, you can't get a Pell Grant. You can't get jobs.
Can't go to college.
Can't go to college. Jobs, food stamps. We basically strip you away from it and make it hard. So you get stuck in this almost a caste-like reality where you cannot integrate back in. And so we've created this since we have a policing and judicial system, a legal system that looks so much more at minorities. Please understand, we now have more African Americans. And by the way, Latino youth, it's the same thing. If you're a Latino boy, by the time you're in your mid-20s, about 44% will have been arrested. Afro-American young men, you see the same thing. So we now are reached this perverse point in our history where there are more African Americans in this country under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850.
Can we shift gears? Even though there's so much more to talk about in terms of police-minority relations, the role of the federal government, we will see what Eric Holder does. We will see what the Department of Justice does. But, Senator, you have been outspoken. I saw you on Meet the Press. Immigration, I saw you talking about that. You said that you believe that the president did absolutely the right thing by signing that executive order. How many millions of Americans now are protected who weren't protected before that?
Close to 5 million.
Some said, I saw them, social media, and others said, how could Bob Menendez say that if, in fact, the president said many times before that, I would never sign an executive order doing that. You should only go to Congress. And then he did that, and some people said, how could Bob Menendez defend him? But you did. Go ahead.
How much time do we have?
Why was the president right?
Look, he was right for a variety of reasons. Number one, as a result of the president's executive order, more Border Patrol will go to the southern border, more felons will be deported, more people will pay taxes like the rest of us do, and more families will stay united. And those are values and goals that I think we all want to see. Now, this president did what 11 other presidents, going back to President Eisenhower, for the last 60 years on 39 different occasions have done in using their executive powers specifically on immigration-related issues, including former Presidents Reagan and the first President Bush, who gave a status to 1.5 million undocumented people in the country at the time, which was a very significant number of the undocumented population in the country. So this protest about this is I-Barack, this is ridiculous. There is long history and precedent. Now, why is it as a policy right? As a policy, these are people who had to be here at least 5 years,
right,
who have to have a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, legal permanent resident child, who will have to come forth and go through a criminal, register with the government, go through a criminal background check, assuming they pass that background check, will then be allowed to work, give a work permit, and they will have to pay taxes. And they will have only a temporary status. This does not give them a pathway to citizenship or permanent residency. So it is part of what could be done. Now, when the president said, I don't have the power to do what people keep referring to, that was about the 11 million and giving all 11 million undocumented people in this country both status and a pathway. He doesn't have that power. He didn't exercise that power. He was judicious in what he did do, which is not the total solution. And that's why what we did in the Senate, where we passed a comprehensive, bipartisan immigration reform bill that takes care of security at our borders, that promotes our economy, and that still preserves our nation as a nation of immigrants, passed 68 to 32. We don't get 68 votes in the United States Senate on contentious issues. For a year and a half, it has languished in the House of Representatives without a single vote. And I am convinced, Steve, if the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and we still have time as we are recording the show, if the Speaker of the House of Representatives put it on the floor of the House, it would pass with bipartisan votes.
Why do you think
we
it's
would
not
have
up?
a reform system.
Why do you think John Boehner doesn't put it up?
Because he has a small Tea Party group, but all in his caucus, that are rebellious to the notion that, in fact, we could find a way to protect our borders, to create a pathway for people to make themselves right with the law, which would take them well over a decade, that the Congressional Budget Office, the independent, nonpartisan scoring division of everything that we want to do in the Congress, said that it would increase the GDP of the country by 5.4% in the first 20 years, that it would create nearly $1 trillion of deficit reduction, that it would create 1.1 million jobs over the course of the first 10 years, and that it would raise the wages of all Americans. Now, what do we ever do in the Congress of the United States that reduces the deficit, grows the GDP, creates jobs, all in a single package? That's what the Congressional Budget Office said.
Well, not only
a simple yes would be fine.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm just saying. I'm just, you know.
You must have some unique power. I've never seen him do that before.
By the way, you know, do you have any idea how historic it is? And our county executives in the House, Joe D., you know this. Is it not a fact that it's rare, you will never admit this, that it is rare that United States senators in the state of New Jersey work this closely together? Look at the silence I get right now. It isn't.
No, we have a history of working together.
Yeah, sure. But
we do.
The cooperation we see between the two of you is amazing. Isn't it a beautiful thing?
Yeah, well, you know, this is what I just want to say.
They just ducked it. Trust me.
I want to say just something about Senator Menendez. I just finished, obviously, a campaign up and down the state where people did talk about.
Was that a close one?
The number one issue was about jobs, which was to see something scored by the CBO that would create so much jobs.
Congressional Budget Office.
Congressional Budget Office would create so much jobs, it would reduce our deficit, that would have such a massive charge to our economy. But the thing about working together, I also heard that everybody was tired of gridlock in Washington. And here was a bill, and Senator Menendez doesn't get enough credit, that he was part of that gang of 8 that actually hammered together a bipartisan compromise and led it through the Senate. It's a testimony to what's possible. And if we just focus, I almost wish we could drop partisan label for a while and just talk about what will grow America's economy, create
doable?
More jobs. And it's doable.
Dropping the labels?
I don't think dropping the labels is doable, but I think that this country needs to get back to the business of America growing our economy again. And this, what Senator Menendez led, is historic in the ability to bring the Senate together, to get it done, get it passed, and do something that would charge our economy.
Stay on this. What happens when the Democrats lose control for powerful people like Bob Menendez and Cory Booker, who would have more power if the Democrats won? What do they do after they go into the minority? Meaning, how will you go from being the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to being the ranking member on the Democratic side? How will you conduct yourself differently in this way? All those who have seen you as the chairperson, what can they expect from you no longer as a chairperson, but being so knowledgeable about foreign relation issues?
Well, Steve, first of all, I've served in the majority and the minority in both houses of the majority, of course. But I've served in the majority and the minority in both houses of the Congress. And I have succeeded in promoting the interests of New Jersey and national views that I have in both houses, in both iterations, majority and minority. Now, what I've done in the last couple of years, and Cory joined me in this last year, in the Senate is, look, the way to get anything done in the Senate because of its rules is you have to seek a bipartisan approach. So how did I get major autism legislation into law in a state that it's so important when we have the highest rate of autism in the nation? Because I worked with the ranking Republican, the senior Republican on the Health, Education, and Labor Committee from Montana, who generally he and I don't have many other things in common. But we worked on this because we found common cause and got it signed into law by the president.
Though.
We did the same thing on homeowners flood insurance. I heard from New Jerseyans, as Cory did when he started running for the Senate in his appointed year, about how New Jerseyans were still facing the challenges of Superstorm Sandy. They survived the wind and the rain and the storm surge, but now they were dealing with a man-made disaster, which was skyrocketing flood insurance that they couldn't afford and needed in order to be able to still keep their mortgages. So the bottom line is we went to work and we put a bipartisan coalition that stopped the rate shock and ultimately drove a piece of legislation that the president signed into law. And I could go on. My point is this.
So the gridlock's not as bad as we think it is?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but the essence of a good story for the press is conflict. Success.
Well, hold on. You think that the gridlock...
Success. No, I'm not saying that the press is responsible for gridlock.
You think
I am saying that elements like this don't get equal time.
The success.
The successes don't get equal time. It's when there's conflict and when you have the challenges, sometimes out of a very principled view, and sometimes out of a partisan view, that get covered more.
The government shuts down.
So my point, by the way, just to summarize, my point is that whether in the majority or the minority, I dealt with minority members in order to have success. I expect that we will have the same set of opportunities when we turn into the minority in January. And the other thing, as it relates to being the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and going to the ranking member, which just basically means the senior Democrat, under the rules that I established with my ranking Republican, in order for me to have a hearing, I had to get his concurrence. In order for me to put a nominee up for a vote, I had to get his concurrence. And that's why, in the midst of the partisanship, every major piece of legislation out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed on broad bipartisan supports, and hundreds of nominees passed, except for 3, with strong bipartisan votes. And I would expect that the same set of rules that I will have a say as to what hearings go forward and what nominees go forward.
So, Senator Booker, as I listened to your colleague, and a lot of the questions that came in across the board through social media did ask this question on so many platforms, as well as on Twitter and Facebook. The level of perceived gridlock is so great, and the perception of Congress so low, tie the two together. Do you think that your colleague is correct in saying that we in the media love the conflict, we love the failure, and we disproportionately focus on that?
Every single day. And this is what surprised me, because when you're a mayor, you can put points on the board every single day. And I see this, I still live in Newark, I see Mayor Baraka doing this every single day. There's a lot that's turned into a park. There's a road that gets paved.
Right.
And I was worried going to the Senate that I wouldn't have that feeling. But what I've been able to do with Senator Menendez, and often with Republicans, is do things that never get into the public eye. Let me give you just a good example of this. We seem to, as a nation, come up with the money to send people off to war, but when they come home, when our veterans come home, we often don't seem to have the resources to do what we should do by them. And I was very happy to see this consensus build, again, Senator Menendez being one of the leaders in that we had to do something to deal with the crisis with veteran care. At the same time that that was going on, I found out that there was traumatic brain injury centers here in New Jersey that were doing incredible work for New Jersey residents that were going to sunset and close. I got on the phone right away, not with a Democratic colleague, with a Republican colleague. We were able to get the funding back into the bill and preserve it. Lots of veterans in New Jersey are going to benefit from that. Those are examples that aren't unique or rare. They go on every single day. And the authority of Congress, this is something, this is very important.
A lot of success stories.
No, but this is a very important point to educate folks about the Senate who may not know this. Another big part of your power in the Senate isn't just passing legislation. It's like what we did with Administrator Fugate. It's oversight of the federal departments. And so, for example, in Cumberland County, one of the poorest counties there was, I had learned when I was mayor, when we were trying to deal with the foreclosure crisis here, that there were lots of programs that we were eligible for, but often didn't have the access into them. And so one of the things we were able to do, Senator Menendez's office and mine, was to get hundreds of young families in Cumberland County into mortgage stabilization programs. So we're able to do a lot more than often is seen, because that's not going to make the headlines.
I got it. Before we talk about education, there's the question on energy.com about Common Core, which we'll talk about. But I just want to say this. For all those who believe that there are a whole bunch of folks on the Republican side of the aisle, for those who believe that there are a whole bunch of folks who will do anything to not have the president succeed, you think that's an accurate assessment?
Is there a universe of members in the Congress of the United States that would do anything they can to not have the president succeed? I do believe that.
If that's
it starts off with the Republican leader who, for the last 2 years, said my #1 priority is to make Barack Obama a one-term president.
But how is that bipartisan cooperation?
Well, that isn't, but that's at that leadership level. But at member levels, if you're willing to reach out to the other side, as I've done in the Foreign Relations Committee, Committee, which is why we've passed major legislation on Iran, on North Korea, on OAS reform, and a whole host of other things, or on autism, or on rate insurance for the whole question of flooding. You can achieve these. Cory, in a very, it's tough to do anything when you first come in an appointed period. I went through that when I first came to the Senate. This success, he underplays it, this success that he had on the question of helping those injured veterans who were going to find themselves without a wherewithal for rehabilitation, is not only here in New Jersey, it's going to have national reach. So those are the things that we work at every day to make happen.
Member relations.
Are there moments of conflict? Of course there are.
Let's do this, Senator. Let's do this.
One more point, Steve, if I can. This is because it's almost when we have these conversations, it's always them in Congress. Please understand that we're in a tough point, and there's a contributing element to it to all of us. Let me give you the example.
Okay, can I ask you to hold that? We'll pick it up on the other end.
Sure.
I promise we'll do this. This is, we're at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. This is a show called The New Congress, a conversation with United States Senator Bob Menendez and United States Senator Cory Booker. You can applaud because you're a live audience.
That's all the time we have. Join us next time for more of this special edition of New Jersey Capitol Report.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation and NJTV in cooperation with 13 for WNET, WHYY, FiOS 1 News, and WBGO Jazz 88.3 FM. Funding for The New Congress, U.S. Senators Menendez and Booker, a conversation with Steve Adubato at NJPAC has been provided by TD Bank, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Natural Gas, Barnabas Health, MD Advantage, NJM, and by NJ Best. Promotional support provided by The Record, North Jersey's trusted source, and NorthJersey.com, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and its monthly magazine, New Jersey Business. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine.
When you work at a public school, you're a part of the community. So when Superstorm Sandy hit, the school employees jumped right in to help. The middle school here served as a refuge for people who were forced from their homes. We all pitched in to help. Custodians, cafeteria workers, teacher aides, mechanics, groundskeepers, all pitching in to help out. School employees are part of a team, whether it's to help educate our children or to recover from a terrible tragedy. That's why I'm so proud to be a member of the NJEA.